Hey miners, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the new home of power mining analysis. In today's episode, we're going to be covering recent developments and news from both Bitfarms and Riot. There's a lot to talk about in today's presentation. Obviously a lot going on between these two companies, in addition to their own press releases and production results coming out. All of that and more in today's video, but before we do, please take a second, smash the like button, you guys. Big help to myself and the channel. Anthony loves it. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join and let us know in the comment section below which of these two companies or both you're currently holding, how you feel about this planned merger or acquisition, and your outlook for these two companies heading into the last few months of 2024. Now, with that being said, let's get into today's video. Okay guys, so that's right, Monday morning, again, no shortage of news making its way into the market here from the Bitcoin mining sector. Now, Anthony, it was a public holiday for us in North America yesterday, not in the UK. I guess you guys don't get a lot of holidays or something over there. So the markets were closed. So Bitfarms, generally the first to put out their production results. This was really the first day of trading since the month of August commenced. So we want to go through the Bitfarms production results. We also got some interesting news out from Riot, and then we can really fill out this Riot Bitfarms discussion in a little bit more detail as we are approaching that special meeting of the shareholders here, and ultimately a decision that will be, as we've mentioned a few times on the channel, Anthony, determined by shareholders at the end of the day. So a lot going on, a lot to get your opinion on. First and foremost, how was your weekend? And what did you do with your Monday off, Anthony?
There was no Monday off.
Work.
You just explain you just explained Monday was a working day in the UK. So no, I was doing spreadsheets, doing updates, ready for this week, getting things in preparation. It doesn't really stop, even if it was a holiday, not took that many days off this year at all, because you're always preparing for the next podcast. You're preparing data for articles, data for updates for social media, so it's just ongoing. And I had a couple of requests from miners and from followers to say, can we include some of those other miners that were missing from that valuation table last week. We looked at balance sheet strength, and we looked at revenues, and did it for sort of like 8 of the biggest miners in terms of self-mining hash rate. But I've done the others, and we'll do that on a podcast this week. So all that information to come. Looking forward to sharing that with you. Some interesting results to come through, and then we can sort of like compare, overall of the 16 miners we've covered, how it all stacks up. So looking forward to bringing that to you this week. But yeah, interesting days today. We know we always get Bitfarms results out first thing, and there was no shock to receiving those. And also we've got the update from Riot as well to cover.
Yeah, a lot going on. I wanted to just pause on those the tables you put together last week, Anthony, because we used them in our podcast. You posted them on Twitter, a tremendous amount of engagement with those posts. And yeah, like you say, we actually had the miners and viewers reaching out saying, hey, we would like to see something similar. Now, in addition to that, we also have DMG on today to talk about Q3. And we have IREN, Daniel Roberts, CEO, on later tonight. He's obviously on Australia time, so we're going to put that video out tomorrow. DMG will come out later today, but a ton of exciting content coming out this week, Anthony. So with that being said, let's start off with Bitfarms. Let's get into the monthly production update. Good looking numbers. I know they've got some mining rigs in transit right now, but for me, and I was just saying this to you before we started filming, the tail of the tape here, I was really hoping to see that 12 exahash. I know they had committed to that in June. We gave them a little bit of leeway. They're obviously very close, in excess of 11. But for me, that was a little bit of a letdown, Anthony, and I was hoping to see that 12.
Yeah, and I think they would have achieved 12 by now. But if you remember from the podcast we did with Ben, he did sort of indicate that there are a number of miners that had to be replaced, sort of like a bad batch. And this is fairly common in miners. This is not This is not, against the norm. This normally happens. We've seen lots of miners go through a number of issues, have to get them replaced. IREN also had a number of miners that needed replacing, so it affected them getting to where they need to do as quickly as possible. Riot, we know from earlier this year when Jason came on the podcast and effectively said 4 exahash of S19 XPs were operating as efficiently as they'd hoped, and so they've literally changed Bitmain to micro BT. So this happens. They've got over 5,000 machines in transit on their way to the sites in Canada, Washington, and some for Argentina. So we know that 12 exahash is going to be achieved, but we've still got to get to 21 by the end of the year, and that's not counting anything from their 2 new sites at Sharon, Pennsylvania, and from Stronghold Mining. Well, Stronghold Mining, I think that deal goes through next year, so that won't be included anyway. So, but they have indicated at Sharon that they're hoping to get 30 exahash up and running this year. So maybe they can get miners into that facility there and get towards that target. So it's going to be interesting. But yeah, in terms of mining, and it's great when you get Bitfarms is out first, because what Bitfarms does, it gives you the benchmark for the rest of the mining updates to come out. And so they mined 233 Bitcoin during the month. That's a reduction on nearly 8% from what they achieved in the previous month. So bear in mind, July and August, 31-day months. And so you'd expect to have a similar amount of output. But bear in mind the difficulty increased, so that would have impacted on miners. And if the difficulty increases, it means that it's taking, they have to adjust to make it a little bit harder, because there's more machines on the network, and when they make it harder, it means it's going to take miners longer, and therefore there's less production. So 233, not as good as last month. And bear in mind, the Bitcoin price at the end of July was 64,000. At the end of August, it was 59,000. So that's 5,000 for every Bitcoin produced. So not only are you not getting the same revenue through, you're also not producing the same amounts of Bitcoin. So it's like for miners in August, it's going to be like a double whammy. From an operational perspective, Bitfarms always provide what they're actually utilizing from their installed hash rate. So installed hash rate was 11.3 exahash. As I say, it's 700 petahash short of the 12, but that 12 was the end of June's target, so not the end of August target. But of that 11.3, they actually had an average operational hash rate of about 10.4. Power-wise, utilizing 310 megawatts of power. In terms of the efficiency from the fleet, they've got that down to 25, and that will continue to drop now throughout the rest of the year as they add more new S21, T21 miners, which are more efficient than the current miners they have in the fleet. So that'll bring that efficiency down towards that, that lower 20 figure. And the expectation, I think, by the end of the year is to get that closer to 21. So that'll achieve there. In terms of Bitcoin per exahash, now this is a metric where we can monitor how miners are competing with each other in terms of their production. 22.4 Bitcoin per exahash. So again, it was like over 24 in the month of July. So that's dropped off a little bit. So and then finally, from a HODL perspective, they've increased their treasury. So they sold 147 Bitcoin of the 233, and they've added to their HODL. They've now got 1,103. So that's 1,103 Bitcoin in the HODL. And at the end of August's Bitcoin price, that's a valuation of about $65 million. So, I'm going to say, it's probably not the update, they wanted to put out, but that'll be a good update compared to the rest of the mine, because we know that Bitfarms generally operates at the top end for operational perspective. But it's going to be, one of those months again where revenues are going to be down, production's down. So, we're looking at, this is Q3. So we've got another, September is the last month of Q3. They'll be putting out their Q3 numbers in probably about 2 months' time.
Well, and I
And
was gonna
so, you
say,
know,
Anthony, sorry to jump in there. The problem here, and I say the numbers were reasonable because Ben is a top operator, right? If any of these companies are gonna make good with tough situation, it'll be Ben and team. So I feel like they did all right. But as you say, the headwinds right now, Anthony, you talk about the global hash rate. I saw last night it's hitting all-time highs. We've also got stories. I've seen a number of posts on Twitter recently talking about Paraguay, energy prices changing, a number of miners having to shut down. So we actually have Ben on the program on the 18th here
yeah,
to talk about the
that'd be good.
Stronghold deal, but we'll definitely be asking him about some of these headwinds in the industry because as you say, Anthony, between difficulty, Bitcoin price, global hash rate, energy prices, it's pretty tough sledding out there right now.
Absolutely. And we're constantly, literally every podcast now, waiting for that day when we start seeing the Bitcoin price rise. Well, today it's back in, it's down in the 57,000 range today. So, this is challenging times for the miners because the margins are quite slim at the moment. And that was articulating the fact that literally, I mean, every miner made effectively a loss in the recent quarter. That's not going to change at the moment in Q3. We've got like less than 4 weeks to go to the end of Q3, unless the Bitcoin price really rallies. That will give some respite for those that have got a hodl. That will give a little bit of respite for those that are selling on a daily basis, get more revenues for their Bitcoin that they sell between now and the end of the month. But I think the next quarter is going to be a bit of another challenging period because the previous quarter was like effectively half pre-halving, half post-halving. This is going to be the first quarter fully post-halving. So, all the miners that came out and said we can mine at this price, this will be where the interesting times will be, looking at that electricity cost compared to the revenues received, what sort of margin they're making there.
Yeah.
Then the operating margin, how much they're spending on staffing, on other costs like professional fees, G&A costs, facilities costs, and whether they're coming out with a cash positive cash flow or free cash flow as we call it. That this will be interesting. And
Yeah.
so first one out the results today. So Bitfarms set the standard. Let's see what the other miners bring out as well.
Well, and on a glass half full note, I've always found in investing specifically, but generally in life, the night is darkest before dawn, Anthony. And I feel as a Bitcoin maxi, as someone who understands Bitcoin, as someone who sees the institutional money coming in to this sector, I feel like we're in the right place. Maybe the timing, we're a little early still, Anthony, but I still have full confidence that Bitcoin will make that rally at some point. We'll sooner or later here for us and the miners. Now, moving along to Riot. So this saga has really been going on most of 2024. Obviously, Riot is interested in acquiring Bitfarms, really speaking very highly of management, of Ben, of the operational ability of this company, as you just alluded to in that update, Anthony. But on the other side of things, Ben is now appointed CEO. A lot of people internally at Bitfarms and investors in Bitfarms from the retail community feel like, hey, you know what? We have got our own company under control and we want to stay autonomous in the marketplace. So that's kind of setting the stage. Now, more recently, we've had some updates come out in relation to this special shareholder meeting. So I'll let you walk through that, Anthony, in a little bit more detail, because we have seen a couple of notable changes in terms of the tone, the dialogue, and some of the requests here. But a very interesting time for both of these companies and really the Bitcoin mining space in general as we watch this play out.
Yeah, it's been a development going on now, obviously, since we originally found out the interest from Riot in Bitfarms in April this year. But those discussions have been going on for like best part of 18 months now. So we saw today an update from Riot, and basically they provided an open letter to the Bitfarms shareholders in advance of this special meeting that's going to take place prior to, on October the 19th, on October the 29th. And We've seen them before raise concerns about the corporate governance within Bitfarms, so they weren't happy with the board of directors and how they were performing as a board. They had very much positive things to say about the way Bitfarms was operationally working. So that was in terms of mining Bitcoin, and they couldn't really fault that, because Bitfarms last year and for this year up to now have been the best performing miner in terms of production. So there was never any issue towards that side of the business. It was more about how the board were managing things. Since then, since those initial discussions, and the fact that Riot have built up their number of shares in the company now to approximately about 19.9, so just under the 20% position. They've got as many shares as they can without breaching 20%. Bitfarms have made a couple of have made a couple of moves. They've actually one of the directors, who was highlighted by Riot, was actually voted off the board by the shareholders at the last AGM, and the chairman stepped down recently. He was another of the board that Riot were concerned with, and he's been replaced too with the likes. So Ben Gagnon, the CEO, is now part of the board as well, and Fanny Phillip became a director after the first director was removed from the board. So effectively they have replaced one of the directors with an independent director. And Ben obviously is as the CEO, he's been given a place on the board as well, and that's not unusual for never mind mining companies, but generally listed companies. Generally, the CEO would be a director of the company. If there was one operational manager on the board, it would generally be the CEO. And in some instances, you could have the CFO as a director, but in this instance, just Ben as the only working member of the board as part of Bitfarms is there. So they have got 4 independent directors, but Riot have said, they want to now, instead of replacing 3 directors with 3 what they confirm is independent directors, they're now looking to replace 2 of the directors on the board. And so they're looking to to highlight where they believe those are, and I think they want to, obviously, one of the board positions they want to change is Fanny Phillip as a director. I've known Fanny for 3 years. In fact, she was one of the first operational managers I actually physically met in the space. I met Fanny and Romain, who were both at that time working for SATO Technology, and met them in London at the AIM Summit. And so I've got to know Fanny over the period like that. And I've had many she's a finance person like me, accountant qualified. So we've had, lots of financial questions going backwards and forwards. And, she would bring, her knowledge of being, an experienced finance individual who's had previous experience in the mining space, and bring some of that experience to the board itself. So you're looking not just for people to come in, you want to see that they've got a skill set behind them to deliver something. So, and generally when you look at directors and look at the qualifications that they hold, many directors would generally be either lawyers or accountants. It seems that many of the big companies will have significant number of independent directors who are either qualified by as an accountant or qualified by law, because those are 2 real qualifications that are most sought after for businesses. If you think about businesses needing to to grow and to develop, and with all the various hurdles that they go through, you want to make sure that you've got really strong legal people that work for the company and also on the board to give direction. And the same with the finance side as well. You want strong finance backgrounds, and that's what Fanny brings to the table. So, that's one of the points. And, the second point they've raised is the purchase, or the proposed purchase now of Stronghold Mining. And, they've got concerns of that there. The payment, which includes purchasing 50 million of the debts that Stronghold currently have on their balance sheet, and paying obviously 125 million for the company as well. So that's 175 million price. So they had concerns about that there. But in terms of, and they're saying that the premium on that offer was like literally 100% of where the company was prior to that offer being made. And they believe that's significantly more. If you remember what Riot did when they looked to put an offer in for Bitfarms, they offered a 30% premium. But it looks like Bitfarms have effectively put a premium of 100%. Now, it all depends on, the day that you're considering this deal going through. From what we're led to believe, Bitfarms have been in discussion with Stronghold for the best part of the last 3 years. So if you think about the share price of Stronghold Mining over that period, it was significantly higher than where it was on the day they announced. So, there are certain things that the shareholders will need to think about as they get towards this day as to what they're going to do. But we're here just to give you the sort of what's been released today in terms of an open letter from Riot, in terms of the actual operation update from Bitfarms, and both arriving on the same day. So we just thought we'd do a podcast highlighting both parts.
Interesting. And Anthony, as a shareholder of both of these companies, I know you are as well, I honestly don't even know which outcome I'm hoping for at this point. It's going to be very interesting to see right up until, I guess, the deadline or the vote date at how this all plays out. But there's so many changing dynamics and variables in this sector as we talk about day in and day out on the channel. It's the deal almost looks different on an hourly basis, just depending on the price of Bitcoin and all these external factors. So time will tell how that works out. Now, Anthony, I know we addressed the two main points. I wanted to just get your quick take on CleanSpark as well. They came out with an authorized share increase. So my understanding here, unlike an ATM, this is not actually selling additional shares. This is just increasing the potential cap to issue shares in the future. A lot of times, maybe this would be used in preparation for M&A or something like that, where they anticipate they'll need to issue or give out a significant amount of shares. However, a lot of confusion on Twitter about what this means, what it is. Also, a lot of questions about why, again, before a long weekend, would you announce a big, impactful development like this? So I just wanted to get your 2 cents. We don't need to go into a ton of depth here.
No, and it's basically they've increased the amount of authorized shares in the company. So previously at 300 million, now it's 600 million. Now they've got that approved. It was approved internally, effectively. It looks like they've issued a lot of preference shares to certain directors who were able to vote with those preference shares to get it passed through. For me, there's obviously 2 issues. One is the timing again. So we had the problem the last time they announced an ATM. This isn't an ATM, but they announced the ATM at the last holiday period at the end of March, and it was after market close. So shareholders were unable to do anything for 3 days, and the same things happened this time. And so it does leave a sort of like a taste, but it's not an ATM. But it leads to an ATM. So now that they've got the authorized shares at 600 million, it means the next thing they can do now is go to the market and put in a further ATM in place as and when they need it. Now they say they're not going to use something imminent. This is all about planning. So, and we can have that discussion another time about miners using ATMs or getting debt or selling Bitcoin to raise capital. CleanSpark, not unlike some of these other big miners, want to grow hash rate significantly. So the shareholders know that their target for this year is 32 exahash. Their target for 2025 is 50. The next thing shareholders need to realize is how's that going to be achieved? What's going to be the capital to get them to that position? And effectively, CleanSpark have used the ATM really well over the last couple of years. They've grown from a company that was valued at 600 million to one that was previously valued at 4 billion. However, today's share price dropped, I think, 13% just after market opened, and it was the worst performing mining stock today. On this news that happened on Friday, because the markets closed when they announced the news. So
yeah,
I don't think it's bad news. I think it's just setting up their position as they go forward. They're going to be raising more capital in terms of ATMs, or in terms of if they were to acquire a company and purchase that company using CleanSpark shares. In a similar way that Riot, when they purchased Block, they issued cash and shares to make that deal, and that's generally how it's done. And Bitfarms and Stronghold is definitely a share swap there. So the Stronghold shareholders will get a certain amount of Bitfarms shares in replace of their Stronghold shares, and so it gives CleanSpark sort of like the planning tools to go and deliver, or start to deliver where they need to go. But yeah, it's all about, the end game is about dilution. Just a case of how they're going to do it, whether they're going to use an ATM or whether they're going to go out there and purchase or make purchases, opportunistic purchases using shares rather than using cash or using Bitcoin.
gotcha.
So yeah.
That's a good one. We'll continue to monitor, and appreciate you just explaining that, Anthony. You're right. ATMs have had a good use case, I guess, in this industry. But I do feel, especially from the retail standpoint, at some point, enough's enough with the dilution, and we need to just start creating value within the organization, right? But as you say, another conversation for another day, Anthony. We'd be curious to hear your thoughts in the comment section below, you guys. If you're currently holding Bitfarms, Riot, or CleanSpark, what you thought about these recent developments. If you're still watching at this point, hit the like button. Feel free to subscribe. We'll see you here this afternoon with DMG. We've got Daniel Roberts with IREN tomorrow, and then we'll be on with our regular podcast schedule following that. Have a great day. Talk to you soon.